Welcome back, you guys, to the second part of our creating our very first user form together. Okay, if you guys remember last week, we went through the basic setup process of building the form itself, adding a nice little label, adding a drop-down box. So if we go and look in here at our user form, it's very blank right now. We have a pretty blank user form. We have a drop-down box that's called winery combo. And inside of this combo box, we are populating it with just one item. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how to dynamically populate this combo box with a table range. So if in the future you want to add values or remove values from the combo box, you don't actually have to do this within the code. We can do that by setting a table inside of our worksheet and then going back, adding, removing, whatever you need to do to the table, and it'll update the user form automatically. So if you have a non-technical person that wants to add a value to the combo box, you will no longer have to go in here and add it to the code. You can just do that by adding it to the table range. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to exit out of this. Okay, great. So remember again, once we click this box, or this little button, it's going to pop up our user form, and we have just this one value. Okay, so let's go ahead and create another sheet. We're going to call this reference tables. Good. And then we're going to create just one single column that's going to hold the list of wineries that we want to include in the combo box. Okay, so we'll just call it wineries, and we're going to call it, I don't know, we'll call it Zach's Winery. We'll call it George's Winery. And we'll call it Aiden's Winery, and Tiffany's Winery. Great. So now what we need to do is we need to actually form this as a table. So we're just going to select here. We're going to say insert, insert. We're going to say table, and we're going to say, yes, my table has headers. Okay, great. Now we need to give our table a name to reference inside of our code. Okay, so we're going to name this table, we'll call it a winery table. We'll say enter. Great, so now we can see that we have 4 values in our table. And let's go back to our user form. So remember to get into what we call the code behind, which is the code behind the user form, not an actual module. We're just going to double click in here to get into that. So this is the code from last week where we said me, which is the user form that we're currently in, the winery combo, and we're going to add an item of winery number 1. Okay, so we no longer want to do this because this is a hard-coded value. We want it to be populated by that table. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to tell our combo box how many columns that we're going to have in it. Okay, so we're going to say me.wineryCombo.column count to tell it, hey, we only have one value that we're going to populate, equals 1. Okay, now we're going to set up our table object and our table array. So we're going to say dim my table as list object, and we're going to dim my array as variant. So what this is my table as a list object. It's going to bring in our table as an object, and then it's going to say, okay, and then we're going to declare the my array, which is going to store the values of what's inside of the table. Great. So now let's say set my table. I'm going to say set my table equals to worksheets, and we're going to reference the worksheet that we just created, which was reference tables. And then we're going to say we're going to get the list object, which is called the winery table. Just like that. Okay, so now my table is defined as this list object within this worksheet. Okay, that's kind of how this is viewed. Now we're going to say my array, which is where we dimmed up here, we're going to say equals my table, so what we just defined, dot data body range. Okay, so it's going to go and look at the range of that table, and it's going to populate our array with whatever's inside of that range. Great. So now we're going to, last thing we're going to do is actually populate the combo box with those values in the winery table. So we're going to say again, me.wineryTable.combo.list equals my array. So we're going to populate the winery combo table or drop-down box with my array, which is holding the values from the table. Great. So Okay, you guys, sorry, we had an error there for a second. I missed one thing. We're going to say list objects. So it's very important that you have the S in there. List objects is what we need. Okay, so let's go back to our sheet, and we're going to run. And you'll see now our combo box is being populated with whatever is inside of that table. Okay, so if we go back to our reference here, and we increase our table by 1, we're going to say, I don't know, Oliver's Winery. So now if we go back here and we run this again, you'll see Oliver's Winery is now popping up into the combo box. And then vice versa works if we remove one of these rows. So if we get rid of Oliver's Winery, and we come back here and we run this again, Oliver's Winery is no longer popping up here. So good, it's working as expected. Awesome, so let's get into the next thing that we're going to do, which is filling in or adding. Actually, let's add a nice little label here. So we add a label, and we say, we'll just call this winery. Bring this down here, just pretty up a little bit. Good. Now we're going to add a text box, so a field where somebody can type in a value that they manually need to enter because it can change over time. So we're going to add a text box here, and we'll just call this, here we're going to store, let's just call it the order number. Okay, so we're going to say order number text. Awesome. We'll add another label, so if we copy and paste this here, we can change the caption. We'll call it order number. Boom. Great. So now, when we run this, this will be a field where somebody can type in anything that they want. So in this case, it should be a number, so order number here. So great, you guys. This concludes our second video for setting up our first user form. So now we have a form with a combo box that is dynamically populated by a list of values in a table range. And then we also have a text value, a text box where the user can manually key in the values. So the next episode, we're going to get into actually saving these values into our workbook. Okay, so after the user is done filling out the form, they're going to hit the Save and Continue button. It's going to take these values, it's going to save them in a nice row and column format to where we can do analysis on it later. So come back next week to watch that video, you guys. We'll see you then. See ya.